Good morning, everyone. This is Charlie Kratovil. I'm here with Mayor Jim Cahill from New Brunswick. And first, let me say it's an honor and a pleasure to be interviewing you once again for New Brunswick Today.
Good to be with you, Charlie.
Thank you, sir. So let's get started with the election coming up this year. I know it's a pretty historic election. Give us your insights. What do you think about it? What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of glad it's starting to focus now on the final candidates, or what appears to be the final candidates, and you never know what really is going to happen at a convention, although it sounds unusual to say something like that, given recent history. But I'm looking forward to more of a issues-oriented discussion / debate between the candidates, and quite frankly, I think, from I am a Democrat, but I think clearly that the best interests of the country will be served by Hillary Clinton and not by Mr. Trump.
Okay. And I know this year there's going to be a new candidate running for city council. I presume you'll be supporting Ms. Ludwig. Can you tell me a little about her and why you support her?
She's a longtime New Brunswick resident, has been a terrific member of the planning board, serving as its chair, has done a remarkably competent and professional job at doing managing and chairing that organization. Can be a difficult and complex task. So she's demonstrated the wherewithal to be a good council person. She's been a Democratic committee person for a number of years, so obviously has shown an interest in politics and getting involved for the betterment of the community. So she expressed an interest, and I'm glad she did. I think she's going to be a terrific candidate, and more importantly, a very good council person.
Terrific. Now you're in the middle of your 7th term.
That is correct.
As mayor, you've still got 2.5 years left in the term. Have you given any thought to whether or not you're going to run for an 8th term?
No, I have haven't gone through this process many times before. The real time frame to make a decision is in about 1.5 years, give or take a couple of months. And to think about what I'm going to do a year and a half from now is, quite frankly, an unnecessary waste of brain power and energy. So we'll continue to focus on what we need to get done today, and starting in a year and a half, and go through the deliberation process internally within my own brain, and see whether or not it's in the best interest of the city, and you have to gauge all of the things that are important in what one looks for in a leader.
Of course. But you're open to running again?
I don't close the door on any options usually. Again, it's something that'll be weighed at the time.
Okay. I know one of the big, plans in the works is redeveloping the vacant Farron Mall.
Yes.
I know a lot of people are interested in that and want to know.
Including me.
Yeah, they want to know when and what to expect. What's your vision for that site, and what when do you hope to have an announcement to make?
Well, I hope I have an announcement to make as soon as you and I are done. I wish I had an announcement to make while you and I were sitting here.
Sure.
But as of now, we're still looking for the right mix, the right developer to partner with DevCo to get the project up and running. We have been and will continue to be very selective because it is, I think, one of the most desirable spots in the entire state of New Jersey, given its proximity to the train station, the most traveled rail corridor in the country, the ability to get to from that location, Rutgers, the healthcare facilities, the government sector, etc., all that New Brunswick offers to folks. It also has great connectivity to New York and Philadelphia, Washington, Boston, etc., and the ability to interconnect with those types of facilities, research facilities like the healthcare industry and Rutgers University, particularly with the merger between in the healthcare side that's taking place in Rutgers and the Big Ten. All of that means that that's a desirable spot. So we are discussing, negotiating with a couple of different prospective office tenants. That is the most difficult part because there's still a lot of vacant office space around the state, and we fare positively to anyone with new construction. But if somebody's looking to fill a vacant spot, let's say a Metro Park, for example, where rents may be $17, $18, because the owners of the property are looking to get somebody in to get rid of some of the vacant space, it will be difficult for us to meet that price point with new construction, but we also offer a lot more as a location. So we have a couple irons in the fire. Hopefully within the next month or so, we can get the ball rolling. As you know, we're going through the remediation process at the site. We're looking to begin demolition, hopefully within the next 60 to 90 days. And we believe that that's also going to help us market the site. We've learned over the years that when, to the extent somebody may lack a vision, all of a sudden the site, cleared and ready to go, says we can produce this and we can produce this in X period of time.
Understood. And so the vision would be for not just offices, but also housing and some stuff on the ground level?
It is a mixed-use site, probably with mixed-use buildings throughout. There's a couple of different layouts that we can go with depending upon who comes in and the timing of when they come in. But you're looking at a range, and everything is dependent upon how much of this will dictate how much of that. Sure. So office space could accommodate 250, 300,000 square feet up to 800,000 square feet. Residential could go anywhere from 250 units up to 700, 800 units. Retail can be anywhere from 150 to 300,000 square feet. And those are estimate ranges. And if you have more office space, you're going to have less residential. If you have more residential, you're going to have less office space. If you have more commercial, you're going to have less of the other stuff. And you have to be able to park it to some extent.
I want to ask about the public housing, the Housing Authority, Schwartz-Robeson neighborhood. Many of the tenants there were getting parking violations that were double what was allowed, $50. So according to my records in 2015, there were 98 different violations that were issued for the $50 amount. Whose idea was that? How did that happen?
I assume it's somebody from the Housing Authority. But I don't know exactly whose idea it was. What I was advised is that it was issued to repeat offenders, so that they were up in the ante, so to speak, for somebody who wasn't reacting to the $25 fine. But without proper authority or regulation, it was inappropriate.
Right, so that was overturned and it was stopped.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Also got to ask about the parking authority. There were 4 employees that were, charged with theft and bribery. 2 months ago, right? Yeah. And April 7th, the prosecutor announced it. And I just wanted to ask, because it says that 3 of the 4 also paid bribes to other parking authority employees in exchange for their silence on the parking conspiracy. Can you tell me, has the parking authority been able to identify who accepted the bribes, or has anybody else going to lose their job over this? Because I know that this is kind of an issue that came up with the former sheriff, where people were paying bribes to get their job, and there was some discussion of, well, what happens to those people who paid the bribes? But here's an issue where you have 4 employees arrested and they paid bribes to other employees. What's going to happen to those employees who accepted the bribes?
Well, you've drawn an assumption that may not be true, but it may be, that they paid bribes to other employees outside the 4 of them. So it's not impossible that one paid the other for their silence, and then that person became a part of.
Well, what the prosecutor says is 3 of the 4 also paid bribes to other parking authority employees.
Yes, and you can interpret that the way you're interpreting it.
Okay.
And you can interpret it that they paid it to each other. That's another employee.
Sure.
I don't know the answer. I'm not telling you, but
okay.
but the point is that it is still an ongoing investigation being handled by the prosecutor's office, and what action will need to be taken by the parking authority will be dictated by the results of what the investigation by the prosecutor's office reveals. As of today, I've not heard any advancement that gives us that kind of information as to whether there were any other employees, and if so, whom.
Okay, so does that mean it's safe to say the parking authority is not doing an internal investigation, that they're waiting for the prosecutor?
Did you guys do that?
I don't know the answer to that question because that's the parking authority, but I do know that if the city is doing, if there is a simultaneous criminal and governmental review going on, we are somewhat limited in what we can do so we don't infringe upon the criminal investigation, which takes priority. So we will go through our internal record reviews. We will be turning them over, but you do not have the ability to talk to the employees as the government because they have the right against self-incrimination. And so you're somewhat stymied, nor can you necessarily plow ahead with your disciplinary action while the criminal case is pending. And the employee, under civil service rules and regulations, has certain rights to suspend things, etc., until such time as a criminal investigation is over.
And then 1 day later, the prosecutor announced that another New Brunswick firefighter had been charged with insurance fraud for filing, bogus disability claims. And I wanted to know what the city's doing about that. Is that the same situation where you're just waiting for the prosecutor to, conclude their investigation, or is there an internal investigation to find out if other firefighters or other city employees were also, lying about the disability?
The city was a part of these investigations, so we continue to review and conduct of our employees, fire department or not fire department throughout, and when appropriate, take matters to the prosecutor's office, and in this instance that was appropriate. So we continue to always monitor these types of things. Now, fairly certain that the employee was suspended without pay, and that we will be looking for the removal of that employee. But yes, you have to wait until the completion of the criminal investigation.
Okay, so is that Mr. Walker or Mr. Patterson?
That would be both.
But so both are suspended without pay presently?
Yes.
Okay. But have not been fired yet?
Cannot fire them without going through the disciplinary. The civil service rules and regulations preclude a municipality from firing somebody on the spot. You can issue them a notice of disciplinary action calling for the removal. They then have the right to have a hearing, and they have to notify you of their intention to have a hearing. And then the hearing is postponed until such time as the criminal investigation is concluded.
Okay.
It can be a frustrating process.
I could imagine. So let's switch to the school system. I know Governor Christie actually announced a new funding formula he wants to implement that would be devastating to the schools in New Brunswick and the taxpayers in New Brunswick.
Sure would.
What's your reaction to that? Do you think this is, why is he doing this, and what are you going to fight it, or do you think it's?
We will fight it, and I think he's going to have a difficult time getting it through the legislature. I also think he'll have a difficult time getting the New Jersey Supreme Court to approve it, and I think it reflects a lack of real consideration of what urban centers are confronted with in the delivery of educational services in situations that are sometimes more challenging than what some of our suburban counterparts are faced with.
Certainly. So the schools went through a transition in 2012, switching from an appointed board to an elected board. Tell me, what's your role now? Do you have involvement in the schools? Do you have input, like for major decisions? Are you kept in the loop?
It's I would describe it as pretty much the same. Even though I had the power of appointment, I was not a daily, what's going on in the schools. I took responsibility for what was going on in the schools. To the extent that I did have the power of appointment, and I wanted to make sure that the people who were on the board were dedicated and committed to serving not only the school community, but the community at large that has a role to play in the schools. Now, I don't have the power of appointment, but I still interact with the school system. I bring to the table some experience. I don't generally speak much to the individual board members, nor did I really ever do that. But usually through the superintendent, we do a number of shared services kinds of programs. Working together, we find that we can accomplish a lot more together than we can separately. And I would describe it as a very good working relationship that recognizes some expertise that the school system can bring to the government side, and that the schools recognize that there's some expertise that the government side can bring to the school system.
Okay. And another transition was a new superintendent coming in. He's just finished his first school year in office, Mr. Aubrey Johnson. What do you think of him in his first year? Did he?
I think he did a remarkably good job in the first year. I think he described it as the listening tour. He made a point to try and understand exactly what was happening in the New Brunswick public school system. Developed relationships with all of the working folks that are there. I think he encouraged, my take on it as an observer, is that he encouraged people to do their fill their responsibilities, let them take advantage of their expertise, willing to listen to what they had to say, and then be ready to implement when he was sure something was the right program or right tack to take. I would say at the end of the first year he did a remarkably good job. I think it bodes well for the schools going forward.
So I know one of the things Governor Christie brought up in his remarks was the graduation rates in some of the urban school districts. He mentioned New Brunswick by name, said the graduation rate was just 68%. What do you have to say about that? Do you think the things are moving in the right direction? I mean, what's being done about getting more kids to finish?
I think if you were to talk to the schools, and please don't hold me to these numbers, but feel free to give the schools a phone call, that if you take a look at this graduating class, which graduated 320 kids, 323, that's remarkable. That's a big number. And I remember a time in the New Brunswick school system during my tenure as mayor when we were graduating more people from the Adult Learning Center than we did from the high school. And the 320 doesn't include the Health Science and Technology High School, which is also part of the public school graduation. So that brings the number to well over 350. You should check with them the number. I believe the number is under 20 of people from this graduating class who did not complete the graduation. So if you do quick math, 20, if it's 20 or less out of 300, that number is now closer to somewhere between 80 and 90%, or is it over 90% graduation rate? So the question you asked was, are things getting better? And I think the answer is unequivocally yes.
Okay. And I did have the chance to attend the Adult Learning Center graduation. It was really a phenomenal experience.
First one I didn't make in a long time.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the school. New Brunswick is, not every community has an Adult Learning Center.
Very few.
Yeah, how important is that to helping people who maybe dropped out a while ago be able to go back and get their degree?
Well, some of the reasons for dropping out early are you need to go get a job to help support your family. Having the comfort level of knowing that your education doesn't necessarily have to stop, but it can continue through that program, and one that's adapted to what you are now doing. Are you working full time? Do you have a family? Are you a mom that needs to provide care for your child during the course of the day or the evening, etc. So that program now has been running for 30 years, maybe a little bit
36.
more. If you take an average of 100, and they graduate more than 100 people a year, but if you do 100, that is a lot of people who now have at least a high school diploma that would not have otherwise had it before. It makes them more employable. It makes them better able to, if they have children, to work with their children in school, to help them with their homework, to emphasize to their children the importance of a quality education. It is a home run, and it is one of the reasons why we continue to do it in New Brunswick, because it's not cheap, and it is unique, and it allows us to be able to continue to serve the community.
Okay. Thanks. Yes, very inspirational program last week. I want to shift gears to the situation with the water in the public schools. I know there were 6 schools that had at least one faucet test above the action level for lead, the action level being 15 parts per billion. And I noticed that our neighbors across the river, Highland Park, had one faucet test above the action limit, and what Highland Park School District did is they actually promised to provide free lead tests to the families of children that were taking classes in near that faucet, and I can't figure out why New Brunswick won't do the same thing for the kids who are in McKinley School and had a faucet that was 12 times the action limit, 187 parts per billion, and I've asked, and I'm not the only one who's asked, provide the testing for the children, so that you can catch the poisoning early, and they can get, they can react accordingly and be treated for it. Why won't New Brunswick Public Schools provide blood tests for the kids?
That's a question you got to ask New Brunswick Public Schools.
Okay, I mean, I have asked, and
It is their decision, and it is one that they have whatever reasons they have for it. There's a lot of theories as to why you would or why you wouldn't, and at the end of the day, you have to decide whether or not it's the responsibility of the school to do that and the taxpayers to do it. When you expend those funds, you're expending taxpayer dollars. And you have the delivery of a whole lot of services that you have to provide to people. So the question is, if you're going to pay that, if you're going to pay for that, what are you not going to provide to the students at this point in time? And then you weigh what is the potential impact of the presence of lead in excess of the standard on a child or any person in the limited amount of time that they may be consuming that water. And what is the responsibility of the parent, to do their own lead testing, for their child. There is a real ability of parents to have their children tested on their own if they're concerned. And even those that don't have money, through the different types of healthcare facilities that we have in town, through Chandler and through the St. Peter's facility on Howe Lane, there are periodic blood. You take your child for an annual examination, and you have blood work done for little or no cost. And so, if that's a concern, the parent can take responsibility for it. I would also suggest that there may be a lot of other causes of lead that may be present in a person that is unrelated to what I would think is probably the limited amount of water that anyone would consume from a given fountain, and that would be their home water or from older homes, in addition to not only the lead pipes that might exist, or the lead solder that might exist, but also lead paint that might exist.
Of course.
So there's a myriad of reasons and people that could pay for the cost of the examination, but it's the school board's decision in that situation, and it's one that they've apparently made. People can voice their concerns to the school board if they so choose.
Okay. Speaking of other sources of lead, I have the water quality report here. In 2014, there was lead testing done by the city water utility of a number of sites, and 2 of those sites were above the action level. Can you tell me geographically where those sites were in the city?
I can't.
Okay.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, and what did the city do about those 2 sites?
Well, what will happen is we generally retest, and the process of the testing, as I understand it, is we test the amount of lead that is coming through, that is leaving the plant. So we make sure that there is not a lead problem in the water that we're disseminating to people. And then there is a selection of some 30 to 50 residential locations that are older homes that are selected because there is more likely to be a presence of lead in that facility. So they take the very first draw of water in the day. People are told not to run the water, to let it sit overnight, and you draw it. And then you determine, and then you run a test on that, and if there's a presence of lead, we then look to see what is the cause of it. More likely than not, it's because the water was sitting in the person's home overnight in either pipes that are lead or pipes that have lead solder.
Right.
And then they're given the advice, because the homeowner is responsible for the lateral. That means the water line that runs from the water main into the house and all the piping through the house. And they're advised that they should run the water for a period of time to make sure that what's been sitting in that pipe is not sitting there, and or they're given the opportunity, the suggestion to replace whatever it is the cause of the problem.
Okay, but so you don't know where the sites were, and you don't know what was done?
I don't know off the top of my head.
What was done? I mean, this was 2014, and you were the water director at the time, correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so
acting water director.
Right. So you don't know what was done about these 2 homes?
I told you what is done generally. This is something we do every year. You're asking me to specifically remember something today that occurred 24 months ago.
Okay, and I believe that.
And you know, Charlie, I have really good recollection on a lot of things, but I do an awful lot of things. And on occasion, rather than guess as to the properties and then have you say, well, I thought you said it was blankety blank location and this is specifically what you did, and I was wrong. I would rather double check to make sure that's right. So you asked me a question, do I specifically remember what properties they were and exactly what was done? The answer is I don't as we sit here.
Okay.
I make myself available to you. You get the opportunity to prepare as much as you want to prepare for the questions that you have on any given subject matter. I come here ready to answer any question that you may have. And on occasion, I don't have exact recall of something. So if you'd like the answers to those questions, I'll get them for you.
Okay, thank you. I did ask your spokesperson yesterday for those sites. I want to know, or just for the record, that lead testing is not done every year, correct? It's every 3 years in New Brunswick, right? It's triennial?
It is required to be done every 3 years.
Okay, would that be something you'd be interested in changing, make it every year, since lead is such an important issue for a lot of people in New Brunswick?
It's one of those things that we could look at. We make decisions based upon, lead is only one of the things
of course.
That you look at. And then would you look at whether or not there is something you've done in the treatment of water that would mean that there would be the potential for higher lead content. In the absence of doing something that would create greater lead content in the water, to test more frequently may be an unnecessary expense.
Okay. I just know that, basically, this is an issue the city is tackling in terms of lead paint, right? And the city's appropriating a lot of money to, help people who have lead paint in their homes fix it. I just don't see the balance between doing a handful of tests every 3 years for the water.
Should we test for lead every day?
I mean, every year?
The state of New Jersey says you test every 3 years. There's a reason for that, because that is reliable information. To test every year, if there is something that is likely to have caused an increase in the lead content, then you would test immediately. You wouldn't wait for the annual test.
Sure.
So again, we could do all kinds of things, and test for this and test for that, but all of those things have a price tag. And the consumer in the water department of the water department has to pay for those things. So we look to balance. We look to balance between testing internally as well as externally. And we find that the balance that we have has so far worked pretty well, and there has been an absence of any indication of lead content in the water that we send out to people for, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that Governor Christie nominated the city attorney, Ben Buca, to be a judge, a Superior Court judge.
He's a planning board attorney and leveling board attorney.
Correct. And I just wanted to ask about Mr. Buca, and if you think he'd make a good judge, if you agree with Governor Christie.
Yeah, I think he's a very bright lawyer, very dedicated, believed to be serves the community well, and I think those attributes will bode well for him as a Superior Court judge.
Okay, and so just like the governor gets to pick the Superior Court judges, you get to pick the municipal court judges, correct?
I do.
Okay, and I wanted to ask about a municipal court judge from the past, Terrell Brenner. Was he someone that you picked to be a judge in New Brunswick?
Terry Brenner. Yes. I would say Terry served as a judge, I believe. Well, he certainly served. I believe I appointed him in the early part of my tenure. I can't say whether he was a municipal court judge prior to that, or I don't have a recollection of that.
Okay, and do you remember about how long he served for, or
not specifically?
How about the circumstances that he left the job under?
No, I don't remember the circumstances he left for.
Okay. I have a lawsuit here from 1996, and in this lawsuit there were some employees who worked under him who made some very serious allegations. Judge Brenner, I'm just reading from the complaint here, Judge Brenner did at various times kiss or fondle each of the plaintiffs. He made generalized gender-based remarks and behavior, inappropriate, unwanted, and offensive physical and verbal sexual advances. Did this have anything to do with Judge Brenner leaving the bench?
It may have. I mean, I'm familiar with those allegations. The question you asked before was, do you remember the circumstances of why he left or how he left? And I don't specifically remember those circumstances. That could have been a part of it.
Okay, and do you recall how this case was resolved? Was it settled out of court? Was there a verdict, or was it dismissed?
I don't recall.
Okay. But this was while he was on the bench, and then it might have had something to do with him retiring or
Not impossible.
or leaving. Okay. And I know there was another judge that you hired was Gerald Gordon.
Yes.
Right. And Gerald Gordon was actually publicly reprimanded. This would be around, I guess, maybe within the past decade. This is from presentment, the Supreme Court of New Jersey Advisory Committee on Judicial Conduct, and there were a number of things that he was reprimanded for, including ordering the court staff to reinstate his driver's license, which had been suspended, and also setting an outrageously high bail for an undocumented person, like $500,000 for a charge that had been remanded to municipal court. And the really alarming part is that, the ACJC found that he suffered from a deep and profound personal illness that undoubtedly affected his judgment. What precipitated his leaving the bench? Was it these charges against him, or some other?
I think it was accusations like those.
Yeah.
I thought it was best for him to no longer serve on the bench.
So it was his choice to resign, or?
I believe I reappointed. My recollection is I reappointed somebody to replace him.
Okay, so his term expired, or something like that. Okay, and how did that happen? How did somebody with such poor judgment end up on the bench? Was this?
He had served as a judge for a long period of time, not only in New Brunswick but in at least one other municipality, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more than one, and served for a period of years with doing a great job. But it appeared that over time he ran into some difficulties, and when those difficulties exhibited themselves, we took the appropriate steps.
Okay. But of course, the judges you have in there now, you have full confidence in that they're not suffering from the same types of problems that they're.
I've not seen any evidence of it.
Okay. I want to ask just a couple more questions of you today. I know there was the State Commission on Investigation's been doing some work into unlicensed dumping of contaminated soil, and there was a project in New Brunswick that the soil from there was taken to an unlicensed place and not properly disposed of. And the really alarming thing is that the organized criminals were involved, and that the mafia was involved. Tell me, is that a big issue in Middlesex County? Organized crime.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not something that's ever come up in New Brunswick.
It depends what you define as organized crime.
Sure.
If you describe organized crime as, to use your term, mafia, that does not appear to be a big item in New Brunswick. Organized crime could also be described as any two people who get together and organize their criminal activities.
Sure.
We have our fair share of that in New Brunswick. And so I'm not aware of anything that is so prevalent that we have a real concern about that. in New Brunswick. Middlesex County folks would be better able to talk about Middlesex County than me.
Sure. And were you aware of this situation with the Morrell Street
No.
soil?
No.
Okay. I'm working on an article about it. It ended up in South Jersey at some unlicensed place, and it appeared to be part of a pattern where a lot of, these, they call them dirt brokers are basically, lying to both sides, saying, oh, yeah, we'll take it to a place where it's allowed, and then they're saying, oh, yeah, this is clean to a certain standard. And
Get it at both ends.
yeah, exactly. So, I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you is, what do you think the biggest problem is facing New Brunswick, and what do you plan to do about it in the rest of your term?
You and I have talked about these kinds of things. Pick your top, top three, top this. The biggest problem for us will always be trying to do all things for all people. And it is the keeping all the balls moving in the right direction, never letting it hit the ground, and continue to provide the resources that we can to serve the community. That requires funds, which are ever diminishing. It requires dedicated personnel in sufficient numbers to provide all of those services, and it requires a constant partnership with the community at large. So it is really the biggest, I won't describe it as a problem, but the biggest task that we have is keep trying to do all the things we're responsible to do. So that means from talking about something that we talked about before, the Farron Deck, building a project that's hundreds of millions of dollars, which some people might think is a very important type of thing, and it is. But we also have to make sure that we pick up somebody's garbage the next morning and do it well, because that's what people count on us for. It's from providing, the best quality in water that we absolutely can, is making people safe on the streets. From a police perspective and a fire perspective, providing recreational opportunities and the ability for people to have a healthier lifestyle. It's to try to create job opportunities for people and provide try to get everybody to be able to live in a house that's clean, safe, and affordable. It's all of those things. So to pick one thing that says that's the most important, arguably it might be the most important thing to me, but I work for 55,000+ other people who might have a different opinion on any given day what's the most important thing to them. So the most important thing to me is to be able to try and address what people think is the most important concern they have every day.
Well, thank you for taking the time this morning. I really appreciate it. Look forward to doing it again.
Good seeing you.
Same here.
Take care.